and Shelley, yes. We should be on our way. Harry, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Every day, once a day, give yourself a present. Don't plan it. Don't wait for it. Just let it happen.
What you just heard there is part of a song that I just finished up. It's called Sweet Treat. I've posted it for free to all of my Patreon subscribers, and I will have it out as a music video in just a few days. In this video, what I want to do is talk a little bit about how I like to work with samples and demonstrate to you how I was able to make some of that beat by taking samples from the Twin Peaks theme song and from the show itself. We will go through some of the technical aspects like rolling off bass frequencies and reharmonizing chords, coming up with a bass line, but I also want to talk a little bit about some general principles as well when it comes to working with samples. For starters, there's no wrong way to work with a sample. There's a million ways to actually do it. What I like to do is to treat that sample like a ball of clay and manipulate it and push it around and morph it until it becomes something completely different and sounds like its own unique musical instrument. Now, before I go into the technicalities of how I did it, you really have to start with just an idea. And here I had zero musical idea at all. All I knew is that I wanted to sample Twin Peaks. And that was enough for me to go into my DAW and throw the file in there and start chopping it up and playing around with it. And through that process, I found something I liked, I found something I was inspired by, and I was able to keep building off of it. So it's important to remember that sometimes music writing doesn't come from this brilliant idea that you already hear in your head. Sometimes it comes from just putting yourself into one of those musical experiments, seeing what grows out of the lab, and then hopefully, something good comes out of it. I literally have like 1,000 unfinished projects on this computer, things that I just started up on a random whim, and then it really never evolved into something different. But occasionally, like this, it does turn into something different, and in very rare instances, it makes it out to becoming a full track like this one. So let's take a look at a little bit more of the technical details of how I was able to put this together. For starters, what's really driving this entire song is that sample. It is taken from the original Twin Peaks theme. So I bought that and I dragged it straight into Ableton. From there, I just reversed it. And as you hear, I can press play at any point in time and get a really cool, interesting sound out of it. It's pretty hard to recognize as a familiar instrument, so I was instantly drawn to that. I chopped up some parts that I thought might sound interesting. I placed it on the 2-beat, the 3-beat, the and of 4, and the and of 1. I got this little sequence. Now, the most important thing to do here was to get rid of those bass frequencies. I wanted it to sound crusty and old and kind of rickety, and in addition to that, I did want to get rid of those bass frequencies. So by putting in a really hard pass filter here on the lows, so I have a high pass filter here, you can see all of my low end is being scooped out, and as I move this up, you can hear those bass frequencies slowly start to go away. And that allows me to reharmonize this chord any way I want. The audible notes here are F, A, and C. So the obvious choice would be to put an F on the bass and make this an F major chord. But I could put a D on the bass and make this a D minor 7 chord instead. Likewise, this next chord is really ringing out the notes of a D minor add 9. But I could put a B flat on the bass underneath that and give it a variation of like a B flat major 7. So even though I experimented with reharmonizing these chords, I decided to just leave the chords alone and keep the first chord as F major and the second chord as a D minor. So just a diatonic 1 to 6 change. And once I knew my chords, it was a lot easier to write my bass line. Now my bass line is very consistent through this entire song. It's just outlining my tonic arpeggio, that F major chord, F, A, C, and then it climbs up to D to support that D minor add 9. Now here I really like this descending line here from this F to this E. That's the note from my F major to my D minor add 9. I thought it was just such a nice little bit of melody in between there, so I really wanted to keep using that idea of going from F to E. I wanted to highlight that. So you can hear the strings are performing in F to E. And then I had a synthesizer just do a monophonic line here that starts off from F to E as well. So I figured let's kind of make this F to E thing a motif that I can kind of keep hanging out on. I just really liked it so much, I wanted to find different ways to introduce it without it getting boring. Now for something totally different, let's take those samples again, let's chop them up much faster and give them much more of a distinct rhythm. And what I ended up getting was this kind of, it sounds like a dancing telephone. I thought it was a really neat effect when it came all together, and it had this really happy, upbeat feel to it. Now, I did get pretty lucky with some of these. There's a lot of notes ringing out in each one of these chords, and when you pitch up an entire chord up and down like that, you can get into a little trouble, but it happened to work out just fine in this case. Now, once my song was completely mixed, I ran the entire thing through Reason's Audiomatic Retro Transformer. It's a cool distortion module that just basically layers your entire track with different layers of distortion. There's a VHS setting, a tape setting, a vinyl setting. And just running the audio through that gives you a lot of cool, different, weird retro effects. And I just put the entire song through that because I like that crusty lo-fi aesthetic. Now, I also used a sample from one of my favorite Dale Cooper quotes. And I just recorded this scene off of Netflix, dropped the audio into my DAW, and it happened to line up almost perfectly. I didn't really need to do any editing to make that a musical phrase, which I found pretty fascinating. Sometimes you get lucky with this stuff, and this is one of those projects where a few things just worked out without me having to really stress over it. Now, before you go out making music with samples, I do advise you to keep two things in mind. Try and find a sample that will be conducive to what you're trying to do. If you're trying to make a musical sounding sample like I did, think of something that's going to have rich frequencies in it. Also, if you're trying to mix in a vocal sample like Dale Cooper's quote, try and find something that doesn't have background music behind it. It can be very difficult to try and find a way to make something that already has music on it in tune with the piece that you're already writing. So you're best off finding isolated vocal samples. Also, it's very helpful to work with samples that you're inspired by. If you find something that's intrinsically interesting and something that already inspires you, you're probably going to want to work with it more. And for me, that inspiration is David Lynch in Twin Peaks. For some strange reason, this show has been very influential over the last few decades. So I figured it would be a great source material to start working with. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you learned something and maybe got inspired to do something a little different. If you did like this video, you can thank my Patreon subscribers for making them possible, and keep a lookout for my music video that we'll be posting here in just a few days. Thanks for watching.
Let it happen.